I'm an English professor at Foothill College. I'm also the director of communications for something called the Stanford Gen Channel. And the Gen Channel is co-hosting an event with Foothill College today for Native American Heritage Month. And we're here today to chat with Alexis Bunten, who among many other things is the director of the Youth Indigeneity Program for something called BIoneers. And then she went to Dartmouth and then has done a number of things, both within education and in the wider sustainability community. And rather than kind of bore you by reading down her CV, I'd rather start by asking Alexis a little bit about what your journey has been like, Alexis. What's your path been like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me here today. I am calling in from the ancestral territory of the Rumsen Ohlone right now, a little town next to Monterey called Delray Oaks. It's one of the smallest cities and most political in all of California, just down the road from most of you, I would guess. I'm Alaska Native, Unangan and Yupik, from South Naknek in Bristol Bay, Alaska. And if you go back far enough on the Unangan side, Attu Island, way out in the middle of the Bering Sea, last village on the last island you can be on without being in the Russian Aleutian Islands. And also in Alaska, we say, if you have a mixed ancestry with settlers, you say you are the child of, that is to say you're descended of, also the child of immigrants to America, a couple of immigrants from Sweden. And I've been exploring that side of my past too, but essentially if it's northern and it's an island, that's my background. And you know, what's funny is that I love to visit cold islands, remote cold islands. And I have like a whole bucket list of cold islands I want to go visit when this pandemic is over. So I was actually born in Seattle, Washington, and I spent my summers and some winter breaks with family up in Alaska, which was great to do. I kept going to Alaska every summer until just a few years ago when it was kind of like practically unsustainable with my life. But I'm always trying to get up there and do work up there, and I love it up there, except in the winter time. So in fact, I'm freezing cold right now and I'm in California with the heat on. But I was living in Anchorage, Alaska in 2000, and I applied to graduate school, and I applied to and got into NYU and UCLA, and I went to New York for one day, and I said, who the hell am I kidding? I'm not going to live like this in a huge city where it's again cold. And I went to UCLA, and things happen, and I just never spent another winter up north again. But rolling back further, cultural capital is this idea that your family knows how to navigate the system because they've been doing it and they've been successful at it. Mine hadn't. So I just didn't realize, oh, you're supposed to get an intern. And I kind of scrambled and got one my spring quarter of my senior year at the Peabody Museum at Harvard. And I just kind of lucked my way into that through people I knew. I studied art history, and I modified it with some anthropology and Native American studies and a minor in studio art. And I think when I was growing up in Seattle, I always loved going to museums. We always had tourists in the summer times in Alaska. We always had tourists, and I kind of looked at this thing called the culture industry, which is where tourists kind of come and appreciate our cultures and histories. And I was always very fascinated by the intercultural interface. So when I was younger, I always imagined that I would be doing something to save the planet and like something like running a museum. And later I did have those opportunities, but I've ended up where I'm at now. I'm going to pause for just a second to let Scott interject, because I'm telling the story in a circuitous way, which is actually very Native.
I'm glad that you told the story that way, and I'm so glad that you referenced your own journey through high school and the journey of your friends. How about telling us a little bit about how you became involved with BIoneers? I was desperately trying to introduce BIoneers, which is a huge organization and has so many wings and so many inspiring wings and branches, if that's not mixing metaphors. But I actually don't know the story of how you first became involved with BIoneers yourself. And then I really do want the students to hear, of course, about the Youth Indigeneity Program, because that's one of the things that I love about this conference. I have never been to a major conference that has so many youth participants. And one of the big reasons is that Alexis's program brings a huge number of Indigenous youth from across North America to Marin County, just north, north of Golden Gate Bridge. And so it changes the whole nature of the conference. Like what you do changes my experience as an older educator because there's so many youth voices there. It's just not the same conversation.
Youth voices are incredibly important. Collaborate on a lot of projects with people who've been activists, career activists, 20 years in. You've seen it all. People get jaded, they get divorced, and then you talk to youth and they're like, yes, this is so important. We have to do this now. And then the fresh ideas, I could maybe have time to share a story about that. But I came to BIoneers because, so I got a PhD in anthropology and I wanted to do it to be able to consult and affect policy that affected our Native communities at the national level. I figured nobody would listen to me unless I had some letters and behind my name, I mean. And then I kind of drank the Kool-Aid for a minute and went on the tenure track academic path, and it wasn't for me. And I really wanted to do more direct activism and make it direct changes for our environment and socially, which BIoneers does. At the conference, they bring together some of the greatest people you've heard of and some you've never heard of with amazing, innovative solutions to environmental and social problems. And so I quit the tenure track academia. Although I'm moonlighting with the class at UCLA right now, and it's kind of fun. So, and I worked for an organization that does mixed methods research for communications, reframing conversations around public policy. And then I really missed being in the Native community and working for tribes and tribal organizations, which I've been consulting for all along for over 20 years, but I wasn't doing it full time. And so I quit that job, and then I went to Sweden. And after I came back from Sweden, my ancestral journey there, I was looking for something new to do that combined all of my interests and passion: young learners, working with youth, making the world a better place. And this position popped up to work with the Indigeneity Program at BIoneers, which was staffed by one person, Cara Romero, who I work closely with and is now a dear friend of mine. And it just seemed to fit everything that I did. And it just popped up in my social media feed, or like someone sent it to me or something. It was like through a friend of a friend. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. And so I applied and got it. And I've been doing it for over 4.5 years. And I actually got headhunted quite a bit for other things. And I just love working for BIoneers so much. I just do it and do my consulting on the side. And I've been consulting for a lot of Indigenous-led organizations to do their own evaluation for their programming that helps with their fundraising. And I've also been working closely with the organization called College Horizons, which is a bridge program that helps Native youth to apply to college, get that cultural capital, and then support them all the way through. And I'm really happy to say that our first year attrition rate is 10 points higher for these Native students than it is for white college going students who have the highest rates. So it's like we took our kids from the lowest statistics to better than the highest statistics through our programming to support them. And that's one of the consulting things I do. And I also do a little bit of moonlighting with corporations to around like organizational development and diversity and inclusion and decolonizing their portfolios and things like that. So, but with BIoneers, we have a very robust youth program. And what I'm going to do after this call today is try and connect you with Maya, who we have 2 youth programs. We have like the broader youth program for all youth, like no matter what your background is. And I also run a Native Youth Leadership Program. And we mainly focus on supporting urban Indian youth in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, because urban Indian youth are like, I feel like they're the most forgotten, overlooked demographic in all of America. Nobody ever thinks about them. And in San Francisco, many of them are the grandchildren of people who came during what they call the termination era in American Indian history, where the U.S. federal government was trying to terminate tribes and also encourage people to move away from their ancestral homelands to the cities. And they promised people, you know, if you move to Minneapolis or San Francisco or LA, we'll get you started, we'll get you job training, we'll get you housing. And all those promises were broken and people couldn't get home. And so now their grandchildren and great grandchildren are youth. This was in the 50s and 60s, 50s mostly. So now their grandchildren are now youth in the city. And they've been very disconnected from their tribal cultures of origins, and they call a pan-Indian experience. And many of them have never been to their ancestral homelands. And so at the conference, what we do is we bring together mentors for those youth to do culturally based activities, storytelling. They get exposure to the conference within a conference that Kara and I put on called the Indigenous Forum, where we have panels of Indigenous leaders talking about different issues that we think are important for people to know, to learn about what it means to be Native and our issues that we're trying to solve, and also for the broader world to learn from Indigenous excellence. Like, we've solved some really good problems, and if the rest of the world did it the way we did it, it'd be better for everybody, because of knowledge that's been passed down through generations of ways to do things.
Students, if you're interested in BIoneers, the Indigeneity Program, or any of the youth programs, you just go to bioneers.org, and this is their Indigeneity page. And again, as Alexis was emphasizing, here's the Indigenous Forum that she was just referencing, Native Youth Leadership, and Rights of Nature, Media for Social Change. And I know, Alexis, you've been very involved in using media extensively, and then traditional ecological knowledge, which, as you're pointing out, I mean, if we would just shut up and listen to Indigenous wisdom, we would be doing the world a service.
The conference this year has so many amazing speakers that I want to see, and it's taking place over 2 weekends, but it's going to be really cool. There's also going to be some talking circles for youth. There's a series of interactive events, and if you go to the website and search around, you can see, obviously I'm not very good at this, the complete schedule. You can see the speakers on all kinds of different topics. The one that I just recorded with Kucha right here was amazing. She was talking about giving the land back to Native folks and decolonizing, and it was so inspiring. And she's just my hero. She's amazing. But you can search through here. What I also wanted to say is that we have a broader youth program that has all kinds of amazing events. And I partner with Maya, the woman who runs that, between that and the Native Youth Program. And we have different kinds of events that we invite all the youth to attend. And since COVID hit, I actually took our Native Youth Program virtual. We made gift bags with PPE for everyone who signed up this year. We have almost 230 people signed up. Usually we cap it at 100. And we've been having events since August. And we actually have an event for Thanksgiving that we're opening up to the general public. It is on Thanksgiving at 5:30 Pacific. You can find it on a Facebook event page on our Facebook feed for BIoneers. And it's an Indigenous comedy night for Thanksgiving. because many of us have very conflicted and contentious feelings about Thanksgiving. And every year for the past 4 years, I've been doing indigenize and decolonize Thanksgiving events to get the word out about it. And this one features Jackie Kelly-A'a and Dallas Goldtooth. Both of them are Berkeley graduates, and they're both hilarious. And I welcome you to join us for that event. And we have a series of other events going on. I've been taking recordings of our panel speeches and making curriculum at the high school level to go along with it for the past few years. But I was a little underwhelmed with making people watch talking heads on screens. And I said to myself, I want to make my own webisode series. So I got a little seed funding to make a first season of a webisode series, and we're making curriculum aligned to California state standards with it. And I can show you the first episode is about 4 or 5 minutes long, and it's called What You Call Us, because every time I teach a class to non-natives about Native issues, people are always really embarrassed to say that their question is, what do I call you? Like, do I say Native American? Do I say Indian? Do I say this? Do I say that? And so I just decided to make a video to solve that problem.
I have a question.
Good.
What do you think about, like, like the Native American, I don't know, like Molly of Denali? Have you heard of that show?
Yes, because I have a 6-year-old.
Oh, like what do you think of the Native representation there in that show?
I've seen a few episodes. I think it's pretty good. I'm actually friends with the brother of the Alaska Native executive producer of that show. And yeah, I think it's good. Well, what's most important is that we get representation in the mainstream media
Yep.
now, which is happening. Our Native Youth Leadership Program that's gone virtual. We've extended it to the BIoneers Conference. Another panel, if you're interested to join, is going to be a Native Writers Workshop. But for us, the audience was youth first, but we did invite everyone in the whole world to join us. And we have Bobby Wilson, who's a member of the 1491s, which is a comedy troupe, but now he's writing for television shows for Netflix. And we have Tracy Sorrell, who does children's books, who actually helped me and my co-writers get an agent and a publisher for. We wrote. It's coming out next year. We wrote a children's picture book about the story of the first Thanksgiving from a Wampanoag point of view. And we actually want to make a cartoon, and we want it to replace Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving in the future. It's just like, honestly, you can do, if you dream it, you can figure out how to do it. I had no clue how to get a publishing agent until I was forced to do it last year for this book, because we wanted this book to be birthed to the world. Wow. And we did it. And then it's also featuring, the writing workshop is also featuring Tommy Orange, who's gotten quite famous for his bestseller last year. He's also an East Bay person, urban Indian, born and raised, and it's going to be really, really good. And they'll be thinking about youth and how to share, how they got in the industries, and writing for television, writing for comedy, writing books, getting an agent. Like, how do you do it, especially if you have no idea and your parents haven't done it before you, and you weren't born to a legacy of people who've been doing that? That's the tough stuff to crack.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And I wanted to ask you, Alexis, more specifically, I know that, say, on BIoneers' website, you list Aleut and IPinCH as tribal identities, but sort of following up on the video, how do those different names, including the ones that were imposed by white colonists and European colonists, map onto your own individual identity? I'm curious myself how that works out for your tribe.
Well, I hope I can answer the question correctly. When I grew up, we say our own tribal names among ourselves, but usually when we're at events, we know what tribes we come from, so we don't have to ask the question because we know each other. But but just to the general public, when I grew up, people always just said mainly Alaska Native. And Ariel, she's from a village further up north where people say Eskimo a lot, but nobody said that. Oh, the only people who said that word when I was growing up were old people, like grandparents' generation and older, because we considered it derogatory. So there's not one unified voice. And then Aleut is a term that was imposed by the Russians during the Russian colonization that everybody grew up with, and it's very confusing. So I decided to decolonize it and switch completely to Unangan, which is our word for ourselves out on the Aleutian Island chain. But sometimes it like sneaks into bios and things. And I don't really have a problem with the term Aleut. I just think I'm just trying to decolonize my mind, which is why I opened up by saying whose ancestral territory I'm calling from. Because if you think about that and the history of where you live and where you've ended up every single day, you're starting to decolonize your mind and to open up to new ways of thinking and understanding your relationship with the landscape you live in. And then UPinCH, that's just our tribal name from our region. So I just acknowledge both of them. We have a great question now. And I also wanted to respond to what you just said, because it's like I read your mind when I made this series, because episode 2 is about tribal diversity, which you raised. And episode 3 is about stereotypes. That's all I made for the first season. But I'm going to secure funding to keep making it better and better and better. And like, just have like a YouTube channel, get it on PBS Digital Studios, Netflix, the sky's the limit. Part of the reason I've been able to do all this fun stuff I enjoy doing is because I've always been an optimist, and I always somehow think I can do whatever I dream up in my mind. And a lot of it is our minds. And then the other lot of it is getting yourself in the right place at the right time. Like if Scott, do you go by Professor Langford? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I really like Scott, and
Okay.
Dr. Scott.
Like if Scott can connect you
I'm a
with
Scott.
people and industries you're interested in, do it, because you can just literally do anything. Actually, one of my friends who went to community college, she dropped out of she was a punk rocker. She dropped out of high school. She lived in a squat with other punks in LA, like a squatter's, like an abandoned building, went to Santa Monica College, and now she's a professor of archaeology in the Cal system. So it's like, you just dream it, you can do it. Okay, so we have a great question about, do I have anything to say about the Sogorea Te Land Trust and land rematriation? Yes, so the Sogorea Te Land Trust, this is an organization that's a number of people work there, but kind of the real person behind it is a woman named Karina Gold, who's a member of the Lijan tribes, which is a village area. It's an Ohlone tribe in the East Bay. She's amazing. We've had her at BIoneers, and it's like you're reading my mind now, Anna, because I'm actually pre-recording a conversation with her for another webisode this afternoon, or doing a tech check for it. And what they do amazing things. They have been working to protect the West Berkeley Shell Mound. And actually all of the East Bay is built on shell mounds, which are ceremonial sites for the Ohlone people there, and were destroyed with the building of San Francisco. And they were able to gifted a half acre of land in the East Bay earlier this year. There is a big land back decolonization movement. They're doing amazing work. I can't spread the word greater about what they're doing, because I think that people and communities across America should learn from what the Sogorea Te Land Trust is doing. They also have an elective tax. I think it's called the Shumi tax, land tax, for settlers and settler descendants to volunteer to pay a tax for the stolen land that they live on, that's helping to support their activities. And they just have, keep an eye out on BIoneers. We'll have a webisode all about this released in the next 6 months, I guess, probably. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for putting the link in there. And Patricia said, what do you do when you face obstacles? So what I do is I just, I look at it as an opportunity for the universe to throw something else at me, and keep my eyes open and call up everyone I know. your community of people, is a great asset, and just being open to it, and like work out and eat healthy. Boy, this conversation from you, Miles, is really interesting. I'm going to have to look up your grandfather. And he wants to know if I'm religious. So I was raised with a lot of our Native beliefs around certain concepts, like that everything doesn't translate to English, but it's like the idea that everything has kind of a living, animate spirit, and that you have to do certain things to keep the earth in balance, and to do things like talk to bears and birds, and that's part of the spiritual practice, and do certain things when you hunt, and we also have a kind of form of reincarnation that's hard to explain in English and doesn't make sense to people in the mainstream society. And there was missionization in Alaska. I have friends from my family always resisted it, but I have friends who lived in villages who have become very Christian. One of them I met in college, and we used to like literally get in fights in classes together because we had completely different views on things. And so I don't know, I'd say I'd kind of take that and like add a sprinkle of like agnosticism to that. I just feel kind of generally agnostic. I can't really um, stick to one thing. Where can you learn more about Native religions?
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can think of a way to answer this before we say goodbye and sign off. I don't
That's a
think they'll
tough
mind
question, isn't it?
if I'm late to my next class. Well, it is a tough question. We should have a whole nother thing on this, because what happens in the Bay Area is there's a lot of things that you call woo, which is like New Agers culturally appropriating Native spirituality and beliefs. And so we're very protective of our private beliefs and practices. And if you're not Native, or if you are Native and were never exposed to it or ripped away from it, and you want to learn this, you could accidentally stumble into that New Agey woo stuff, and it's not good, and you don't want to accidentally do it. And there's also a lot of debates taking ceremonial medicines like ayahuasca and peyote and things like that. There's like a good way to kind of get into that, and then there's just the culturally commodified making money off spirituality way, which is of course not ethical. So you have to just keep Googling until you stumble upon or meet somebody like me who could try to help set you in the right direction. But that was a huge question. A good one, though.
Well, if I can, you can correct me if I don't get this wrong, but my white guy's answer to that is you've got to be extremely patient and deal with the fact that people have every reason to distrust you when you ask that question. And you need patience, and you need to be a good listener. And asking for instant answers is the worst possible way to go, because there's real the history is harsh, including the New Age history recently, but going back hundreds of years of cultural appropriation and genocide and everything else. So I think it's not like a McDonald's drive-through and you ask for spiritual wisdom and suddenly it's handed to you in a little package out the window. That ain't gonna work. Right.
Yes, it takes a lifetime to learn.
So I just want to thank Alexis for making time for us in between getting ready to tape keynote lectures for the BIoneers conference and whatever is happening on the other side. It's really generous of you to come and share with our students. And Alexis, thank you once again for sharing time and yourself and your wisdom. And we'll hope that we'll see some of the middle college students joining and participating in in Indigenous youth programs in the upcoming BIoneers conference.